Today, we're diving into the powerful story of a young man named Julian. His journey is all about crafting an identity basically from scratch, piecing it together from a past that was, for him, a total mystery.
So, let me ask you this. What happens when a crucial piece of your own story is just missing? How do you build a complete picture of who you are when you're working with an incomplete puzzle? Now, for Julian, this wasn't some abstract thought experiment. This was the central challenge of his entire life.
So yeah, our story really kicks off with Julian feeling like a puzzle, missing its most important piece. He was just grappling with this incredibly fragmented sense of who he was supposed to be.
Julian's childhood was, well, it was a story of real contrasts. He was the youngest of 5 kids, raised by an incredible single mom. In their home, love was everywhere. But, money and resources were pretty scarce. And he felt that. He felt the weight of their struggles for sure. But what weighed on him even more was the profound absence of his father. That empty space, that silence, it really became the defining feature of his entire youth.
Now, this feeling of being incomplete, it wasn't just a passing thought. It was a deep psychological struggle. And to really get it, we need to talk about this idea of confronting your own shadow. The brilliant psychologist Carl Jung actually had a name for this. He called it the shadow. And it's basically all the parts of ourselves that are unconscious, the stuff we deny or just don't understand about ourselves. For Julian, his unknown heritage was his shadow. He felt like this huge part of his identity was just buried, totally out of reach.
As a teenager, Julian got really into philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche. He'd read this quote and, intellectually he got it. If you have a why, a purpose, you can endure almost any how, any hardship. But that was the whole problem. He hadn't found his why. He just felt like a victim of his circumstances. So these powerful words, they honestly felt less like an inspiration and more like an accusation.
And then, the turning point. At a community meeting, Julian met Clara, a counselor who just immediately saw the turmoil he was in. She suggested he try writing, not to become a famous author or anything, but just as a way to discover himself, an idea she'd gotten from the philosopher Montaigne. And that simple suggestion, it lit a spark.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just about keeping a diary. For Julian, picking up that pen was a total act of rebellion. It was a rebellion against the silence that had defined his life. It was a way to finally take control of his own story.
So how did he do it? Well, his process kind of unfolded in 3 key stages. First, he just started writing. He poured out years of confusion and hurt right onto the page. Then he started to unpack specific memories, the good stuff and the painful stuff. And finally, through that whole process, he began to confront his shadow. He started to realize that, yeah, his circumstances had shaped him, but they didn't have to define him.
And this realization, it led to the most profound shift of all. The very things he once saw as his heaviest burdens were about to become his greatest strengths.
I mean, this just captures the shift perfectly. He went from seeing himself as a victim to seeing himself as the author of his own story. That feeling of being an incomplete puzzle, it gave way to accepting that he was a unique whole person. And his empathy, which once felt like this heavy weight, became a bridge to connect with other people.
The real epiphany, though, inspired by Montaigne, was realizing it's okay to be unfinished. It is absolutely okay to be a work in progress. Now, this acceptance didn't magically fix his past, but it finally freed him from its grip. He saw that his upbringing hadn't broken him, it had actually forged a resilience he was only just beginning to understand. And with this new sense of freedom came a whole new sense of direction. Julian wasn't just writing for himself anymore. He was about to find a much bigger purpose in his own story. He started sharing his writing, his whole journey, with his community. And his vulnerability was just magnetic. By reframing his past, not as this source of shame, but as a catalyst for his own growth, he started inspiring others who were also struggling to find their place. He literally became a beacon of hope. So, what can we all take away from Julian's journey? His story just weaves together these 3 powerful ideas so beautifully. From Jung, we see that real growth happens when we confront the parts of ourselves we try to hide. From Nietzsche, we learn that adversity isn't just something to survive, it's something that actually builds our strength. And from Montaigne, we get this beautiful idea that true authenticity is found when we just embrace our imperfection. And that's really the heart of it. Julian's transformation was total. The boy who felt defined by what he lacked had become a man defined by his purpose. And he found that purpose not in spite of his struggles, but because of them.
And that kind of brings us right back to you.
Julian found his power by daring to confront his own story. So the question is, what's the unwritten story, the shadow, the struggle, the imperfection in your own life that, if you chose to face it, could redefine you?